So, I'm going to try something new today. Kind of like bored. I've been at home all day. I'm kind of sick. So I just finished editing. I just want to say sorry for all the gum chewing. I'll be back. Wanted to recommend both the book and the author, Kurt Vonnegut, and the book is Slaughterhouse 5. He's written a bunch of books, but they're all very, I would say, poignant and clever and just like weird. Just go through and underline parts that I think are interesting or pretty, whether it's the picture it paints, just the way it's written. So something I also wanted to do was I wanted to recommend a podcast, a YouTube channel, and a music artist. Podcast that just came out. Eric Weinstein just started his podcast, The Portal. He has on filmmaker and documentarian Werner Herzog. Really interesting interview. At one point, Werner Herzog talks about being shot in the stomach while he's interviewing, and he's such a badass that he just goes, "This is an insignificant bullet," and then he wants to keep being interviewed. Pertaining to what I'm talking about today, he actually says about reading, yes, watch films and do whatever you need to do to learn in technical terms, but read 6 times. If you don't read, you will be a filmmaker but mediocre at best. If you really want to become somebody of significance, and everybody who is around at this time of significance is reading. They're all reading. Everyone, and you're not. And it's not just for filmmaking. That's a really good podcast. He also interviewed Peter Thiel, and I would really follow that one because Eric Weinstein is so smart, so interesting. And the YouTube channel I wanted to recommend is called The Academy of Ideas. I don't know if you can even see that, but it's a philosophy and psychology is a lot of what he talks about. Super smart. He sounds like a kid. He sounds really fucking smart. Makes me angry. People who have taught themselves how to live, what to be, what to do, from reading great works will not be overly susceptible to the culture industry's latest wares. They will be able to sample them or turn them completely away. They'll have better things on their minds. And then the music artist I wanted to recommend is Kennedy. The album is Life is a Party and the song is Karate. Probably sounds like garbage from my phone, but... Hope you guys all like my smelly cat voice. 3, 2, 1, go. So this is I'm just going to read all my favorite quotes from this book. Hell no, said Kilgore Trout. You think money grows on trees? Trout, incidentally, had written a book about the money tree. It had $20 bills for leaves. Its flowers were government bonds. Its fruit was diamonds. It attracted human beings who killed each other around the roots and made very good fertilizer. So it goes. Bye, Malice. Okay, you gonna come back? Come here. Hi. This is my roommate's dog, Malice. She's a sweetheart. You want me to read to you, Malice? You gonna read to me? That could be cool. Somewhere in there was an awful scene, with people expressing disgust for Billy and the woman, and Billy found himself in his automobile, trying to find the steering wheel. The main thing now was to find the steering wheel. At first, Billy windmilled his arms, hoping to find it by luck. When that didn't work, he became methodical, working in such a way that the wheel could not possibly escape him. He placed himself hard against the left-hand door, searched every square inch of the area before him. When he failed to find the wheel, he moved over 6 inches and searched again. Amazingly, he was eventually hard against the right-hand door, without having found the wheel. He concluded that somebody had stolen it. This angered him as he passed out. He was in the back seat of his car, which was why he couldn't find the steering wheel. Oh, hope you didn't hear that one. Why is it that you never mentioned any of this before the airplane crash? I didn't think the time was ripe. I just think that's... God, I'm such a goon. I don't know, I like that. Time was ripe. This, hands down, might be the best scene in any book I've ever read. American planes, full of holes and wounded men and corpses, took off backwards from an airfield in England. Over France, a few German fighter planes flew at them backwards, sucked bullets and shell fragments from some of the planes and crewmen. They did the same for wrecked American bombers on the ground, and those planes flew up backwards to join the formation. The formation flew backwards over a German city that was in flames. The bombers opened their bomb bay doors, exerted a miraculous magnetism which shrunk the fires, gathered them into cylindrical steel containers, and lifted the containers into the bellies of the planes. The containers were stored neatly in racks. The Germans below had miraculous devices of their own, which were long steel tubes. They used them to suck more fragments from the crewmen and planes, but there were still a few wounded Americans, though, and some of the bombers were in bad repair. Over France, though, German fighters came up again and made everything and everybody good as new. When the bombers got back to their base, the steel cylinders were taken from the racks and shipped back to the United States of America, where factories were operating day and night, dismantling the cylinders, separating the dangerous contents into minerals. Touchingly, it was mainly women who did this work. The minerals were then shipped to specialists in remote areas. It was their business to put them into the ground and hide them cleverly, so they would never hurt anybody ever again. The American flyers turned in their uniforms, became high school kids, and Hitler turned into a baby, Billy Pilgrim supposed. That wasn't in the movie. Billy was extrapolating. Everybody turned into a baby, and all humanity, without exception, conspired biologically to produce two perfect people, named Adam and Eve, he supposed. She was a dull person, but a sensational invitation to make babies. This is after Billy gets abducted by aliens. There were two peepholes inside the airlock, with yellow eyes pressed to them. There was a speaker on the wall. The Tralfamadorians had no voice boxes. They communicated telepathically. They were able to talk to Billy by means of computer and a sort of electric organ which made every earthling speech sound. "Welcome aboard, Mr. Pilgrim," said the loudspeaker. "Any questions?" Billy licked his lips, thought a while, inquired at last, "Why me?" "That is a very earthling question to ask, Mr. Pilgrim. Why you? Why us, for that matter? Why anything? Because this moment simply is. Have you ever seen bugs trapped in amber? Yes. Billy, in fact, had a paperweight in his office, which was a blob of polished amber, with 3 ladybugs embedded in it. Well, here we are, Mr. Pilgrim, trapped in the amber of this moment. There is no why." Yikes, that hits. This one's kind of... he's in a boxcar on his way to a work camp, or a concentration camp, in Germany. Listen, on the 10th night the peg was pulled out of the hasp on Billy's boxcar door, and the door was opened. Billy Pilgrim was laying at an angle on the corner brace, self-crucified, holding himself there, with a blue and ivory claw hooked over the sill of the ventilator. Billy coughed when the door was opened, and when he coughed, he shit thin gruel. This was in accordance with the third law of motion according to Sir Isaac Newton. This law tells us that for every action, there is a reaction which is equal and opposite in direction. This can be useful in rocketry. The train had arrived on a siding by a prison which was originally constructed as an extermination camp for Russian prisoners of war. The guards peeked inside Billy's car owlishly, cooed calmingly. They had never dealt with Americans before, but they surely understood this general sort of freight. They knew that it was essentially a liquid which could be induced to flow slowly toward cooing and light. It was night time. The only light outside came from a single bulb which hung from a pole, high and far away. All was quiet outside except for the guards, who cooed like doves, and the liquid began to flow. Gobs of it built up in the doorway, plopped to the ground. Billy was the next to last human being to reach the door. The hobo was last. The hobo could not flow, could not plop. He was not liquid anymore. He was stone. So it goes. Here's another one. It looks like they're passing out clothes at his camp. It was the guards' firmly expressed wish that every American without an overcoat should take one. The coats were cemented together with ice, so the guards used their bayonets as ice picks, pricking free collars and hems and sleeves and so on, then peeling off coats and handing them out at random. The coats were stiff and dome-shaped, having conformed to their piles. The coat that Billy Pilgrim had got was crumpled and frozen in such a way, and was so small that it appeared not to be a coat, but a sort of large, three-cornered hat. I don't know, I think that's funny. So now they're talking about Tralfamadorian books, which the Tralfamadorians are his sort of go-to alien. Talking about how books are written. You're right. Each clump of symbols is a brief, urgent message, describing a situation, a scene. We Tralfamadorians read them all at once, not one after the other. There isn't any particular relationship between all the messages, except that the author has chosen them, carefully, so that when seen all at once, they produce an image of life that is beautiful and surprising and deep. There is no beginning, no middle, no end. No suspense, no moral, no causes, no effects. What we love in our books are the depths of the many marvelous moments, seen all at one time. I don't even know what that means, it's just kind of beautiful. back to Billy's coat. Billy Pilgrim dressed himself. He put on the little overcoat, too. It split up the back, and at the shoulders, the sleeves came entirely free. So the coat became a fur-collared vest. It was meant to flare at its owner's waist, but the flaring took place at Billy's armpits. The Germans found him to be one of the most screamingly funny things they had seen in all of World War II. They laughed and laughed. So, now Billy's in the mental ward. Billy covered his head with his blanket again. He always covered his head when his mother came to see him in the mental ward. Always got much sicker until she went away. It wasn't that she was ugly, or had bad breath or a bad personality. She was a perfectly nice, standard-issue, brown-haired white woman with a high school education. She upset Billy by simply being his mother. She made him feel embarrassed and ungrateful and weak because she had gone through so much trouble to give him life and to keep that life going, and Billy really didn't really like life at all. Single tear. He held a book he wanted to read, but he was much too polite to read and talk, too, easy as it was to give Billy's mother satisfactory answers. The book was Maniacs in the Fourth Dimension by Kilgore Trout. It was about people whose mental diseases couldn't be treated because the causes of the diseases were all in the fourth dimension, and three-dimensional earthling doctors couldn't see those causes at all, or even imagine them. Okay. Next. Rosewater was on the next bed, reading, and Billy drew him into the conversation, asked him what he was reading this time. So Rosewater told him. It was The Gospel from Outer Space by Kilgore Trout. It was about a visitor from outer space, shaped very much like a Tralfamadorian, by the way. The visitor from outer space made a serious study of Christianity, to learn, if he could, why Christians found it so easy to be cruel. He concluded that at least part of the trouble was slipshod storytelling in the New Testament. He supposed that the intent of the Gospels was to teach people, among other things, to be merciful, even to the lowest of the low. But the Gospels actually taught this: before you kill somebody, make absolutely sure he isn't well connected. So it goes. The flaw in the Christ stories, said the visitor from outer space, was that Christ, who didn't look like much, was actually the son of the most powerful being in the universe. Readers understood that, so, when they came to the crucifixion, they naturally thought, and Rosewater read aloud again, "Oh boy, they sure picked the wrong guy to lynch that time." And that thought had a brother. There are right people to lynch. Who? People not well connected. So it goes. Next. But among them was this poor earthling, and his head was encased in a steel sphere which he could never take off. There was only one eye-hole through which he could look, and welded to that eye-hole were 6 feet of pipe. This was only the beginning of Billy's miseries in the metaphor. He was also strapped to a steel lattice which was bolted to a flat car on rails, and there was no way he could turn his head or touch the pipe. The far end of the pipe rested on a bipod, which was also bolted to the flat car. All Billy could see was the little dot at the end of the pipe. He didn't know he was on a flat car, didn't even know there was anything peculiar about his situation. The flat car sometimes crept, sometimes went extremely fast, often stopped, went uphill, downhill, around curves, along straightaways. Whatever poor Billy saw through the pipe, he had no choice but to say to himself, "That's life." "Go take a flying fuck at a rolling donut," murmured Paul Lazaro in his azure nest. "Go take a flying fuck at the moon." I think Billy's still at a work camp, but he's making food. On his second day, Billy was cleaning behind a radiator, and he found a spoon. To his back was a vat of syrup that was cooling. The only other person who could see Billy and his spoon was poor old Edgar Derby, who was washing a window outside. The spoon was a tablespoon. Billy thrust it into the vat, turned it around and around, making a gooey lollipop. He thrust it into his mouth. A moment went by, and then every cell in Billy's body shook him with ravenous gratitude and applause. There were diffident raps on the factory window. Derby was out there, having seen it all. He wanted some syrup too. So Billy made a lollipop for him. He opened the window. He stuck the lollipop into poor old Derby's gaping mouth. A moment passed, then Derby burst into tears. Billy closed the window and hid the sticky spoon. Someone was coming. This is describing Billy's wife's car after she gets in an accident. Or as she gets in it. Valencia adored Billy. She was crying and yelping so hard as she drove that she missed the correct turnoff from the throughway. She applied her power brakes, and a Mercedes slammed into her from behind. Nobody was hurt, thank God, because both drivers were wearing seatbelts. Thank God, thank God. The Mercedes lost only a headlight, but the rear end of the Cadillac was a body and fender man's wet dream. The trunk and fenders were collapsed. The gaping trunk looked like the mouth of a village idiot who was explaining that he didn't know anything about anything. The fenders shrugged. The bumper was at high port arms. "Reagan for President," a sticker on the bumper said. The back window was veined with cracks. The exhaust system rested on the pavement. When she arrived at the hospital, people rushed to the windows to see what all the noise was. The Cadillac, with both mufflers gone, sounded like a heavy bomber coming in on a wing and a prayer. This is about... This is a sci-fi novel within the book called The Big Board. He got a few paragraphs into it, and then he realized that he had read it before, years ago, in the Veterans Hospital. It was about an earthling man and a woman who were kidnapped by extraterrestrials. They were put on display in a zoo on a planet called Zircon 212. These fictitious people in the zoo had a big board, supposedly showing stock market quotations and commodity prices along one wall of their habitat, and a news ticker, and a telephone that was supposedly connected to a brokerage on Earth. The creatures on Zircon 212 told their captives that they had invested $1 million for them back on Earth, and that it was up to the captives to manage it so that they would be fabulously wealthy when they returned to Earth. The telephone and the big board and the ticker were all fakes, of course. They were simply stimulants to make the Earthlings perform vividly for the crowds at the zoo, to make them jump up and down and cheer, or gloat, or sulk, or tear their hair, or to be scared shitless, or to feel as contented as babies in their mother's arms. This is Billy Pilgrim I think he's at a sex shop. Billy was mildly curious as to what could possibly have been kept hidden in such a place. The clerk leered and showed him. It was a photograph of a woman and a Shetland pony. They were attempting to have sexual intercourse between two Doric columns, in front of velvet draperies, which were fringed with deedly balls. I just like the deedly balls, I guess. And that's the last funny one. This one's, if what Billy Pilgrim learned from the Tralfamadorians is true, that we all live forever, no matter how dead we may sometimes seem to be, I am not overjoyed. Still, if I am going to spend eternity visiting this moment and that, I'm grateful that so many of those moments are nice. And then this is a little more serious. The whole topic of the book is about the firebombing of Dresden, and this sort of brings it up and how it's sort of an unknown. I mean, I don't think most people, I certainly hadn't heard of the firebombing of Dresden before I read this book. The advocates of nuclear disarmament seem to believe that, if they could achieve their aim, war would become tolerable and decent. They would do well to read this book and ponder the fate of Dresden, where 135,000 people died as the result of an air attack with conventional weapons. On the night of March 9th, 1945, an air attack on Tokyo by heavy bombers using incendiary and high explosive bombs caused the death of 83,793 people. The atom bomb dropped on Hiroshima killed 71,379 people. So it goes. Yeah, so that's crazy. Oh, bonus, if you're still watching. No, I'll do that. I was also going to throw in a little bit of Breakfast of Champions, but I still need to finish that one. So, I don't know. Tell me what you think. I've never done this before. I've had people tell me it's a great idea. I've had people tell me it's a terrible idea. But we'll see how much of this actually makes it to YouTube, because I don't really, kind of shy and I don't like putting myself out there. But figured, fuck it, you know. I was bored and I've wanted to do this for a long time. I love, I don't know, I'm big into literature, I guess. And so I thought I want to share it with everyone. So whoever's watching. Let me know what you think. If you liked it, cool. If not, cool, I guess. And whatever you're doing, hope you're having a good day, and take care. If you liked it, like, subscribe, notification thing. I'll take Bitcoin, personal checks, Pokemon. Yeah. Stop. La 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 la. Reading Rainbow. Shut up, Brian. Fuck. Not happy with my performance.